Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Milton Speaks Candidates Forum. I'm Michael Lynch, and I have the pleasure of serving on the Milton Access Television Board of Directors. Tonight, I'm also joined by fellow board members, Ms. Becky Bdera and Ms. Anna Varghese. Tonight, we have members of our press panel. They are members of the Milton High School debate team. We are joined by Mr. Daniel Steinberg, Mr. Tucker Corman, Mr. Alexander McKettrick, and Mr. Sam Boucher, who will be tonight's moderator. I'm also joined by Ms. Elaine Carroll from the Milton Times. This year, our forum is taking a slightly different format where members of the debate team will actually be filling in and acting as moderator. So at this point, I'd like to welcome everyone again to the Milton Speaks Candidates Forum, and we will be turning it over to our moderator for the evening, Mr. Sam Boucher.
Welcome. First, some housekeeping. The candidates were contacted through the town's clerk office as well as MATV for participation in these forums. Candidates were not provided the questions or subject matter before tonight's debate. Tonight's questions will be directed towards all candidates and no individual questions will be asked. Tonight's questions will be asked by members of our press panel. We also solicited questions from the public. If you do not hear your question being asked, it may be part of another question or a repeat question from another panel member. The format for tonight's forum. Each candidate will be allowed a 90-second opening statement, and questions of the candidate will then be asked by members of the panel. Each candidate will be allowed a 90-second response to each question. The order for the first question will be alphabetical by last name, and the order will change for each subsequent question. There will be a 1-minute closing statement offered to each candidate, and the order will change randomly. There will be no rebuttals. I will signal when you have 15 seconds remaining to wrap up your answer with a little wave, and I ask that you finish your thoughts and bring your response to close at that time. Please also reference the countdown clock on the TV screen in the studio. Tonight's forum will feature the candidates for Select Board and Town Treasurer. Our Select Board candidates are incumbent Mr. Richard Wells, Dr. George Asher, Dr. Cindy Christensen, Mr. Philip Joe Henning, and Mr. Benjamin Zoll. For Town Treasurer candidates, we have Mr. Michael Dean and Ms. Johanna McCarthy. Each candidate was asked to submit a brief bio to be read this evening, which I will now do. After each bio, the candidates will read their opening statements, and we will begin with our Select Board candidates, and we will start with Dr. Asher. George Asher is a lifelong Milton resident, having attended the Milton Public Schools and Boston College High School. He's a seasoned institutional investment professional with over 35 years of experience in the analysis and management of fixed income, high yield, venture capital, and equity securities. He chaired the Milton Warren Committee from 2017 to 2022, the longest of any citizen in that position. He and his wife raised 4 daughters and enjoy their 4 grandchildren. He has been active in his avocation as a musician and is the music director at St. Elizabeth's Church. Welcome, Dr. Asher.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. I thank our viewership for tuning in to this important forum, the members of the Milton High debate team, and my competitors in this election. I am humbled to be in this company of civic-minded individuals and pleased to bring to the voting public my views on how our town is governed, how it can be governed, and the issues that we face. What I'd like to bring to a discussion of this nature, and certainly in my years as warrant committee chair, was an inclusion of all points of view, that everyone in this town, resident, taxpayer, of all demographics and all neighborhoods, are welcome to share their opinions. The opinions are valid, should be heard and considered on all issues. We face many issues in town of great import in many cases, and as we move forward through the 21st century, it is up to us as neighbors, as people who have the best interests of our town in mind, and to continue to keep discussions civil and constructive. I encourage everyone to vote. I have a mantra: if you don't vote, don't complain. And I look forward to having this conversation with the members of the board over here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Asher. Next, Dr. Christensen. Dr. Cindy L. Christensen is a researcher, scientist, a teacher, a community advocate, a mother, a friend, and a grandmother. Professionally, she is a fellow of the American Statistical Association. She is the Biostatistics Course Director and Instructor for the Boston University Henry M. Goldman School of Dental Medicine. She is a health policy researcher with a PhD in statistics, a master's in statistics, and an undergraduate degree in mathematics, all from the University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Christensen has 25 years of experience on dozens of multidisciplinary healthcare, health policy, and medical studies at Boston University, Harvard Medical School, and Health Services Research Centers of Excellence at the Veteran Affairs. Welcome, Dr. Christensen.
Thank you. I am running a no waste campaign to provide you with an example of how I will approach my responsibilities as your select board member. When you see a yard sign for one of my competitors, please decide to select Cindy for select board. Instead of asking you for campaign donations, I ask that you make a donation to a local charity of choice. If you select Cindy for select board, I will not waste your tax dollars. When you receive dear friend cards and campaign materials from my competitors, please decide to select Cindy for select board. Instead of talking, I believe in doing, and I ask the same of you. Speak up and demand accountability and transparency of your town government. Vote, attend, write, call. If you select Cindy for select board, I also want you to expect these things from me. Instead of wining and dining you at meet and greets, I ask that you spend your time cleaning out your cupboards and making donations to the Milton Food Pantry and the Animal Shelter. If you select Cindy for select board, all residents of Milton will have a voice. I believe in term limits, minority reports, inclusiveness, and accountability. I am independent, I stand up to bullies, and I call out hypocrisies. I'm a researcher, a scientist, a teacher, community advocate, a mother, a friend, and a grandmother. I'm Cindy Christensen, and I ask for your vote for select board.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Next, Mr. Joe Henning. Phil Joe Henning and his husband John have lived in the Hillside neighborhood for 14 years. Phil is from suburban Philadelphia, attended Catholic grammar in high school, and he graduated from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and received an MBA from the Booth School of Business at the University of Chicago. Phil prides himself on careful attention to the bottom line while providing excellent value. Welcome, Mr. Joe Henning.
Thank you very much. I feel angry at George because he took my speech, but I concur with everything he said. Important to me is the committee, most important to me is the Committee for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in town. And I support the work of Roxanne Musto and Erin Bradley. But more than just, let's say, racial equity, sexual orientation, things like that, I really believe in diversity of thought. And I would like to see more acceptance of the diversity of thought in the town. And so on that, I agree with George 100%. Every person should be heard, must be heard. Everyone must be able to speak their mind so that all points of view can be incorporated into eventual decisions. And I just checked to see what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean. And it means fair treatment and allowing full representation in the community. As I have lived in Milton, I haven't seen that, but I have high hopes for the future. I ask for your vote.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Wells. Richard Wells Jr. has served on the Milton Select Board for the past 6 years and is currently the senior member. Prior to this, he served on the Milton Police Department for 32 years, the last 9.5 as Chief of Police. Service to others is a central part of Richard's life. He fights hard every day for Milton, our excellent employees, and our citizens. Welcome, Mr. Wells.
Thank you. Good evening. Everyone having fun? When I first came into this board 6 years ago, I came to learn very quickly that this is a very difficult job. Milton is a community that has many issues. People want to have very good public schools. They care about having strong public safety, police officers and firefighters. They advocate for the DPW and having their streets plowed and cleaned and cleared and issues with that. And these are very important issues. But our community is like a 100-piece puzzle. It doesn't function, the wheels don't turn unless all the pieces are in it. And it's a constant challenge to try and keep that puzzle together. Milton is also about our employees. They are the men and women, the teachers, the police officers, the firefighters, our big agencies and our smaller agencies, Parks and Recs, Board of Health, the libraries, the cemetery. All these people that go out each and every day that make this community move forward. They're the ones that do it, not those who set policy. They're the ones that make the quality of life here so important. The other thing that you learn very quickly is life is not easy for everyone here. And agencies such as the Milton Residence Fund and the food pantry and those that are supported by this town are just as important. So if I am reelected, I continue to fight for all those aspects that make Milton this great community that we all call home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Zoll. Benjamin Zoll was born in Toledo, Ohio, and attended Hamilton College as an undergraduate with a degree in international relations and the University of Washington, where he received an MA in East Asian Studies. Ben has been working in nonprofit administration and advancement for almost 20 years, starting at Johns Hopkins University and spending time at the Conservation International, Harvard, and Boston Children's before accepting his current role as Vice Dean of Advancement at the Brown School of Public Health. Ben lives on Canton Avenue in Milton with his fiancée, Jennifer Myers, and their blended family of 4 children. Ben's family are involved in arts events for the schools and Milton overall. Ben has served on the town meeting and on the town board for Milton Foundation for Education. Thank you, Mr. Zoll.
Thank you, Sam. As a Z, I'm used to being last and hopefully not least. It's a great pleasure to be here with all of these esteemed folks who are all working very hard to represent Milton on the select board. I have been in this town for over a decade. I've seen my children grow up here. I moved here from Singapore, and I can't think of a better place that I could have picked, from the schools to the very warm and vibrant community that has welcomed us here. It's important, some of you may know me from my service on town meeting. More of you probably know me from seeing me play at Porch Fest or the Farmers Market, or perhaps on the sidelines of a soccer game or in the auditorium at Milton High, watching a chorus or strings or orchestra concert or any of the other activities that you could find me at. I think it's important that we have a current parent voice on select board because our parents and our kids are going through a lot right now with the pandemic. It's important that we have that representation. As a nonprofit professional, I've spent 20 years figuring out how to take different voices, bring them together, and come to consensus. And I agree with all of my peers up here who have said it's important that we hear every voice. It's important that folks have a chance to be heard. And I think it's very important that ultimately we come to a decision on all of these issues that Milton faces. We'll be talking about those tonight. I have confidence in my ability to bring folks together to find a path forward for Milton, and I would appreciate your consideration as a select board member for Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. So now we will begin the forum. The first question will be from Mr. McGettrick and will be for Dr. Asher, and then we will go down alphabetically.
Thank you. So Dr. Asher, how do you feel about the current role of town meeting in town politics? And if you were to be elected to the select board, are there any changes you'd like to pursue?
Town meeting is democracy in its purest form. It is a remarkable organization. It is really the only place where citizens are able to truly give an opinion and to make those changes which are important in the town and to exercise the responsibility that they have as representatives for their neighborhoods. Town meeting currently has a very broad distribution of opinions. And one of the things that I noticed as a member of town meeting and in my capacity as chair of the warrant committee was that there has been a successive change in the presentation of opinions. I don't want to say there's been a loss of decorum, but there certainly has been an increase in stridence. I don't think that's any secret. I think those of us sitting here who have been members of the town meeting have recognized that. One of the aspects of living in a town like Milton is it's a great place. We all know why we moved here. There are reasons why we moved here. Those reasons are different for everybody, but what is essential is that we all remember why we live here and to have the discussions that we have in the town meeting and make them fruitful and productive. The way that we exercise our responsibilities as voters in the town meeting is going to be very much a question of how the issues are phrased for it. And I think if there's anything that I would change, it would be to focus the bylaw changes very, very acutely that come forward, and to have utter transparency in the budget process.
Thank you.
Next will be Dr. Christensen. We can repeat the question if you would like.
Answered this. Okay, thank you. If I recall correctly, one of the recommendations made by the state to the Town Government Study Committee was to reduce the size of Milton's town meeting. I would be in favor of that. I believe now there's about 30 per precinct, and I believe that often for the very busy people who volunteer to be town meeting members, they do not have the time or the devotion to make informed votes on the articles. I appreciate that a few years ago the warrant committees began being taped by Milton Access TV. I believe that helps with transparency. I do feel that it continues to be a problem for town meeting members who are trying to get information from the town to get that information before making their vote. And I believe that Milton has some room to grow in that respect. I have had frustration with that myself as a town meeting member. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next will be Mr. Joe Henning.
Recently, there was a meeting at the beginning of the campaign season at Cunningham Hall where people who were interested in town meeting had the opportunity to learn more from warrant committee members, from current town meeting members. And one of the interesting things that I heard there was that people felt that their town meeting members, they didn't know how to contact them, how to interact with them, speak with them, communicate the issues important to them. And my own experience has been the same. When I first arrived in Milton, we tried to speak with town meeting members. We didn't get calls back. I think when a town meeting member chooses to be a town meeting member, there has to be some desire on their part to represent the public instead of just representing themselves. So I value the tradition. I would like to see more representation of the community at large.
Thank you very much. Next will be Mr. Wells.
Thank you. Well, Mr. McGetrick, I think in answer to your question, I think if you asked most town meeting members on night 1 of the annual town meeting versus night 5 of an annual town meeting, you will get a distinctly different answer. Town meeting is Dr. Asher said, it is the purest form of government. It can sometimes be frustrating because it goes on, it's differing opinions. I've sat through many. I will say to you that many of the positives in this community are products of town meeting. This building that you're sitting in tonight, this studio, this equipment, the high school, all the schools are products of the vote, a positive vote of the town meeting, of the elected town meetings in Milton. The new fire stations that are being built in this town are a product of the town meeting of this town. Many of the positive things that have happened, the new CPA, the Community Preservation Act, is a product of a positive vote of town meeting. So it can be frustrating because government is hard. It moves, as I said, when I first got here, you think, oh, like, we're gonna do this like fairy dust. We spread it around and we get an answer. It's very hard to get positive accomplishments, but town meeting in this community, while it's changed in many times, even in its format, it used to be on Saturday all day long, and you didn't go home until it was over, no matter what time it was. There are many positive things that come out of town meeting, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the town meeting members who sit here now and all those past town meetings who historically have contributed so much to their community.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Next will be Mr. Zoll.
Thank you, and thanks, Alex, for the question. I agree with much of what's been said already. I agree 100% with Dr. Asher. The town meeting is really a democracy in its purest form. I think that there's been some great progress and some reforms in town meeting over the last couple of years. I'm really delighted that they're moving to an electronic vote system. I think that's really helpful. I would love to see that continue to provide a little bit more transparency. The attendance records for town meeting, for example, are often not updated as quickly as they could be, and I think folks deserve to know whether the folks that they've voted for are actually showing up to do the work that they've been elected to do. I know that when I served on town meeting, as a Zoll, I got to go all the way down to the end of the form to sign my name, and there were more blank spaces, I think, than I hoped that there would be. A couple of other thoughts on this. I think, again, Dr. Asher is right about the sort of rise in rhetoric at town meeting, and I think that really, I think that kind of comes from the top a bit. I applied to be on the warrant committee last year, and I was told that there were a proportion of Democrats, Republicans, and independents that would be allowed, and so we were kind of already setting up a political quota system for the warrant committee. And of course, the warrant committee is what's providing the town meeting with their guidance. So I think we need to really take politics out of the warrant committee, and I think we should take it out of town meeting. If we really want to have these civil discussions, let's focus on the issues at hand. They're not Washington, D.C. issues, they're Milton issues. And I know the town meeting members of Milton are ready to tackle those issues, and that's why they're there. And I think that they're doing, for the most part, a fantastic job, as Mr. Wells has said.
Thank you. The next question will be from Ms. Carroll and will be for Dr. Christensen.
How do you think the town should address the school building committee's request to use the land on Guild Road to reduce overcrowding in the schools?
Well, first of all, being a statistician and loving to get deep into the details, I've done my own analysis using, I believe it's called NSDAT data, and I agree with the state that at this time, Milton is not in need of an additional school. Saying that first. Secondly, I'm against the land swap. I believe that as a town we have to be true to the intent of the donor, and I also believe that it's not a fair swap. I hope I answered the question. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, Mr. Johanning.
I'm against the land swap. I think in order to promote the idea of additional bequests to the town in the future, we have to be faithful to the intent of the Lamb sisters. So I think we need to forget that option. I also agree with Dr. Christensen that I don't believe that an additional school building is necessary at this time. I've been the chief financial officer for a number of large divisions, small companies, and I don't think that my experience is that you always have to look at least 3 options, and I don't know that we've really looked at the options other than building a new school sufficiently. I think that it would be important to look at if we have to make a new building, do it at Glover or some current school facility. I would choose not to buy additional land. I would choose not to build an additional building because I don't think the school population warrants it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wells?
So this is one of the million-dollar questions that you deal with when you're in this role. I disagree on the stats. One of the people that has both been elected by this town and currently works for this town is Dr. Glenn Pavlicek. And I don't think there's anyone in town who knows the needs and the trends of this school system more than he does. And when I sit and I listen to him and I watch him about numbers and trends, and when he discusses overcrowding, I take him as serious. And he's just one example that I'm using. The land swap is a difficult thing for me because in 2 reasons. One is I thought the Fontbonne site is a better site, and I've spoken publicly at our most recent meetings, and I've been advocating strongly with the Sisters of St. Joseph to try to get them to come back to the table. The eminent domain aspect of it, truthfully, in my 6 years in the select board, it's not something we've ever done at all that I recall in any way, shape, or form. And so it's when they refer to the reference to the Lamb sisters, I hear the difficulties in that. My strongest belief in this is an issue that needs to be debated at town meeting. I think everyone needs to have their say in this. But I'm continuing to advocate strongly because I think in anything we do, we have to have a plan B. And so we can't just look at one thing and not another. I do concur with everything that I have been supplied with as far as the need for the school, as to how we get it and where we put it. That's really the toughest thing that we have to deal with right now. And the town meeting will have to decide on in 6 weeks' time.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Wells. Mr. Zoll.
Thank you. I want to start by really acknowledging and applauding the work of the school building committee, who has been tirelessly at this for over 4 years and really has looked at a tremendous amount of options around town. They've done some fantastic work donating their time and their talent, and I think they should be applauded for that. The data that the state has provided about our schools has been consistently wrong for 10 years about our school growth. For 10 years, we've been told the school population is not growing up, and for 10 years, we've seen it go up. And, at Glover, we've seen the population grow by over 100. Same at Tucker. Our teachers and our administrators have done a fantastic job of finding spaces for our kids to learn. But if you go into an elementary school right now, you know that the time is up. We've got kids in libraries. We've got kids learning in gyms. We've lost our music rooms. We've lost our art rooms. These are not the public schools that I moved to Milton for, and they're not going to be the public schools that other people are going to want to move to Milton for if we don't move forward with this. Just a couple words about the land swap too, because I think it's very important we always remember that this is about the schools and our kids. But the chairman of the Conservation Commission is in favor of the land swap. We're getting 60 acres in for a little less than 3 acres out. I used to work for an NGO called Conservation International. Whenever we did conservation, we always put the community first. The needs of the community have to come first, otherwise you can't get what you need. We're getting more land. The committee has constantly come back with increasing the buffer from Home Inc. I think they've done a phenomenal job. We need the school. We're going to need this land. It's going to save us $8 million if we don't have to buy it. So I'm in favor of the land swap.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. The next question will be from Mr. Corman and will be... Oh, I'm very sorry. Dr.
It's okay.
Asher.
The issue has been before the town for quite a while. At the warrant committee, we talked about both the need for a new school and the conservation land, land swap. Over a long period of time, we heard many points of view. Many of the issues that the candidates have brought up have been considered and considered again. I think we have to look at it from a very dispassionate, empirical point of view. In the first place, acknowledging that you kids really deserve a great place to go to school, and the teachers need our support. That's a given. I have 4 children who went through the public schools and benefited enormously from it, and this is even before these beautiful buildings were put up. Having been a student in the Milton Public Schools, I experienced the crowding in the 1960s and 70s, so I understand that issue. I think as we move forward, though, we have to listen to the voices of the community and the town and look at options, as many options as we can to make use of the facilities we have and to work with all constituents, students, teachers, parents, the teachers union, the administration of the schools, and other members of the community to come up with the right solution. I don't have an answer whether we need a new school or not. I've seen the numbers. But the simple fact that the intent of the Land Sisters was to maintain the conservation land as pristine is something that we really have to look at long and hard before we decide to violate that.
Thank you, Dr. Asher. Now the next question will be for Mr. Corman, for Mr. Johan.
Thank you, Sam. Considering its recent developments in the past couple of years, what is your position on turfing the lower field at the high school?
I had some questions about this while I was getting signatures on my nomination papers, and it appears to me that the majority of the people with whom I spoke are against it. I think natural grass is the way to go. That's the way it was when I was a kid. Nothing much has changed. If I fell down on a turf field, I don't think I'd like it. Falling down on grass is considerably different. I prefer the natural medium. Maybe it costs more to maintain, so be it. That's all I have to say on it.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Wells.
Well, this could be a long one because I've probably been to 25 meetings on this issue. I've followed it very closely. I have immense respect for Park and Rec Director Kevin Chisholm and all the work they've done, all the work the coaches and so many have done on this. I also chair the Capital Committee, which is major in infrastructure improvements. We looked at the possibility of grass. I've listened to multiple experts who said the grass just will not work there with the grade and the line of it. We already have one, Brooks Field, which has been highly successful. It's in its second generation. Curry, Milton Academy, both have turf fields. You know, I've heard the negative side, but the positives truly outweigh it, and the ones that really influence me the most are the students who will play in that field and the coaches who will coach in that field. Every coach, from soccer to football to the athletic director in the school to the gym teachers, everyone has advocated on why there should be a turf field. Every place I have looked, in every community, they have turf fields of this nature. And if a turf field is good enough for Tom Brady, then it has to be good enough for the students of this town. And so I will continue to support that field.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zoll.
I thought Richard was going to say he's been to 50 soccer games. Well, I have been to a ton of soccer games and other games, and I have to agree 100% with Richard on this. I think if you go to another town, their fields are turf. The parents of kids right now who are playing soccer can tell you almost every away game that you have, you're going to have a better field than you have when you're here at Milton. You know, I have fallen down myself as an amateur player on some of our grass fields, and it is not comfortable. They are often barren. They're often rock strewn. We have their goose droppings. They're just not in great shape. So I'm 100% in favor of a turf field. I think if the coaches are saying this, if the other communities have done this, it's really the right move for Milton. I think it's a no-brainer, and I think, you know, also in terms of like the maintenance and the overall costs, it's going to make a lot of sense for us. And frankly, it also keeps our kids safer. Falling down on turf is a little safer than falling down on natural grass, and I'm 100% in favor of that.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Dr. Asher.
I feel like I'm conducting my choir at St. Elizabeth's. We're all in harmony on this subject. Well, we can try that later if you want. But I think generally speaking, again, I defer to the coaches and the professionals on this one. I don't have much to add other than to saying I think it is the proper thing to do at this juncture. The offset is that it's always nice to have anything natural. You know, if we were going to look at green and being green, conservation tells us we should be using natural elements that will emit oxygen and consume carbon dioxide. But in this case, I would defer to the judgment of the coaches and the recommendation that exists already.
Thank you, Dr. Asher.
All
Dr.
yours.
Christensen.
Yeah. So, you wanted a different answer, you're going to get one now. As I mentioned, I'm doing a no waste campaign, so that should tell you what my answer to this will be. As a public health researcher, I'm extremely concerned about the amount of exposure, particularly the amount of exposure to PFASs in growing minds and bodies. I think that we, in our society, we often go for convenience over public health. As you probably know, I do a lot of work with aviation noise and pollution, and this is another area of pollution that we are not paying attention to here in Milton, where the planes are under 3,000 feet and on arrivals, and the pollution is known to fall towards the ground in that situation. So we are already, with the highway going through town, with all the backed up traffic, we are already exposing our children in this town to excessive amounts of pollution, and we should not purposely expose them to more. So I am against the artificial turf. I think that we would regret it. It will be one of these things that Milton looks back on and says, who made this poor decision?
Thank you, Dr. Christensen.
I think George wasn't listening to me. I didn't agree to it.
Well, there's always a dissonant note in every question.
No, there are two dissonant notes.
Dissonant notes,
Okay, our next question will be from Ms. Carroll and will be for Mr. Wells.
The new MBTA communities law requires the town to create a significant multifamily zoning district, much of it near the Mattapan high-speed line. How should the select board provide leadership in this area?
roll up your sleeves for number one, because this is going to take a lot of work. Housing clearly is one of the things you learn about when you're on this board, particularly affordable housing. You look at the pressures. I do strongly worry about this. This is going to take a lot of work. We've already received correspondence this week from the Attorney General pushing this, that they want to take this very seriously. They're proposing zoning for another 27, a new zoning for what could be 2,700 new units. This is going to take a great deal of hard work, leadership, public discussion. I mean, this is something that's going to have public discussion as to how this is going to be approached, and if we're going to fight this at all. And I don't know if we'll be able to fight it immediately. I think we're going to have to sit back and look at it. Because this just started. This is brand new, and this was handed off from the Baker administration to the Healy administration. This is something we're really going to have to put a lot of thought and effort into it, and whatever we do, we really have to look at the best image. The prior question you asked about the school, look at the difficulty they have trying to find a school. How are you going to find another school or another fire station or another park? This is going to take some work, and I really think we need to be very thoughtful and strategic in how we do this.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zoll.
Thank you. I agree with Richard that the Attorney General has sent a very strong signal that the Commonwealth will pursue legal action against towns that are out of compliance with this, and they've suggested that other parties are standing by to do just the same. So, whatever we think about the law is the law, and noncompliance, I don't believe, is an option, because we're going to end up paying more in lawsuits, and we're not going to win those lawsuits. And if we don't follow this through, you can also imagine someone coming into town from outside, buying up some land, starting their own construction, and suing us for being out of compliance. So the choice is really, do we want to choose how we zone Milton? Do we want to make those decisions here in town, or are we going to have those decisions made for us by outside forces because we're going to try to ignore state law? I don't think that's an option. I also agree with Mr. Wells that we're really going to have to roll up our sleeves and do this work. I know our planning board is very capable and ready to do this work. And it's important to remember that we're talking about zoning, and we're not talking about building, right? So we're not talking about immediately taking a bulldozer and going down Elliott. We're talking about zoning and figuring this out, and that's what we need to do right now. But I think it's absolutely imperative that Milton makes these decisions ourselves, that we don't let inaction cost us more than action would cost.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Dr. Asher.
This issue is extraordinarily complex, and I think that we all have to understand that there are components of it that will be challenged that I know are already being discussed by other towns in the class action nature. When this was passed, it was not passed by it was passed by a voice vote, not a usual roll call vote. So I think there are questions as to the accountability as to who, in fact, is pushing the urbanization of suburbs, which this clearly is. With respect to the exact question about leadership, I think, yes, Milton should be making decisions for itself, and so to have a cram down, which is what in the business we call, securities that are effectively pushed onto you in a sort of a swap transaction given to the town is something that we have to consider and to think about, and is this the way we want Milton to be run? As I said earlier, people moved to Milton for reasons, and one of those reasons is they wanted space, they wanted the plot of land of their own. They did not look for high density. If they wanted density, they could look across the river very easily and find other communities. The implications for the town, I do not think, have been well thought through by the individuals who promoted this legislation, because adding a dense swath of housing of that nature would put enormous pressure on town services, which, quite frankly, the town's budget would be incredibly stretched. And I think that the select board should consider its options to contest this vigorously.
Thank you, Dr. Asher. Dr. Christensen.
I think that often Milton perceives itself as an island, and of course we are not. This is a state issue. Milton does have a say in it, but looking back at the decade of work that I've done on the Milton's aviation problem, that problem does not get solved at Milton level. This problem with zoning changes will not get solved at the town level. We have to expect our representatives and our senator to help reverse the law. I believe Milton needs to follow the law. I'm concerned, as Mr. Zoll has, I believe, stated about the cost of not following the law. But just because you follow the law doesn't mean you're not also working to change it. And I believe that that is the approach that Milton needs to take, and we need to recognize that this is not just our problem, and that it was decided at a different level than our town government, and we need to try to reverse it at that higher level.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Mr. Johanning.
I agree 100% with Mr. Zoll. I think that we need to show ourselves to be an accepting community and at the same time work to negotiate the terms. I think I have a different world than maybe the other members of the panel in that I work at a factory location, and I work with people who make maybe $25 to $50 an hour. And these are people who love their families, want a better way of life, want to live in a better community, and I think they should be afforded the opportunity to do so. All of the problems of housing insufficiency should not be placed on the city of Boston. We all have to take our responsibility for our neighbors, and we have to show some compassion and love for our neighbors. And I think it's important for us to negotiate the terms, but at the same time, show ourselves to be willing to help and to provide a better life for the people who want to move to Milton.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Our next question will be from Mr. Steinberg, and we will start with Mr. Zoll.
Mr. Zoll, seeing as how progress on the development of the animal shelter remains relatively slow, what plans do you have to move this project forward, or do you even see it as a priority in the town's agenda?
Well, that's a great question. I do see it as a priority. I think our animals, anyone who owns an animal, which I do, particularly if you've ever owned a rescue animal, you feel a certain way about animals. I think the animal shelter that we have right now is, everyone knows, not in good shape. It was not built to be in good shape this long into its existence, and we really need to find other options. I think, there has been some discussion about can the current land that the animal shelter be on be used or not used. I think there is some disagreement about that legal opinion that whether or not that land can be used. I think, for one, it's already used, an animal shelter is already on site. I think that we would have a strong case to continue to put a new building on site there. We have some money that's already committed for this, so it's not going to cost us a lot of money if we don't have to go to a new site. So I feel like that's something that we really have to take into consideration. And I'd love to see us think creatively about the space as well. Perhaps there's a way to put a dog park there or something else that people have been advocating for. That would be a public use. That would be something that families that have that are living in apartments or that live in split dwellings where they don't necessarily have fenced yards, they could bring their dogs there. I feel like there's some real opportunities here, and I think we need to think creatively about it. But I do think we need to move ahead with it. We cannot kick this can down the road. We can't for the sake of those animals that are in that shelter.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Dr. Asher.
I have a very warm spot in my heart for the animal shelter. My favorite niece, who grew up here in Milton, is a veterinarian and used to volunteer at the animal shelter when she was in high school, and maintains a friendship with many of the people who are there. I also believe it represents an opportunity. It's inadequate. I think that's absolutely clear. I think the land use is something that should be factored into the overall usage for that trust that exists over there that's under the supervision of the select board. I also think it's an opportunity for a public-private partnership, which should be explored in greater detail. The town has many calls on its revenues. I've often said that the town does not have an expense problem, it has a revenue problem. And this is a clear case where there should be, I believe, a public-private partnership that would be able to develop an alternative for the animal shelter that is better than the really inadequate space that is there now. And to offer opportunities for people in the town to participate in training. I trained one of my dogs there also through obedience classes. It didn't work very well. I mean, poor dog didn't pass. Instead of getting a diploma of finishing, we got a certificate to repeat the course at 50% off. It was kind of upsetting. But anyway, I think that the opportunities to do something there are great, and we should explore them to the extent we are able to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Asher. Dr. Christensen.
Now we're in agreement. The animal shelter is just not adequate, and I do not have a dog. I'd love to have a dog, but I've got, as I mentioned, 2 cats and 4 chickens, and they're just not ready to have I did just get I'd call him my grand puppy, my grandson's dog. I love the idea of a dog park. I moved here from Brookline, and they had several dog parks that worked very well. You find most people who take their dogs to dog parks they're very responsible as far as dog waste goes. You don't have to, bless you.
Sorry.
You don't have to worry about that, and it's something that people can do as a family. And anyway, I also want to give a shout out to the animal control officer. I believe her name is Nancy, and I have found her to just be a wonderful person, even for injured bunnies. And so I do think that Milton can be proud of what it tries to do for the animal shelter, but we do need more effort put there.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen.
You're
Mr. Johanning.
I find in business management, in management of problems, sometimes you have to just say, enough talking, let's do. And putting down a timeline, putting down decisions that would lead to the termination of the project, the successful termination of the project, it's just an important thing to do. I think this particular project has been talked to death, and it's time just to say, we're going to do it and lay out the timeline. It may not be next year, it may not be in 2 years, but there has to be a timeline, there has to be real milestones, and it has to be followed so that the townspeople can feel, and animal lovers can feel, that we're actually on track to get this job done. And I think the lack of a timeline, the lack of milestones, the lack of progress is just a frustration for the town. I think also, I hadn't thought of it before, but the idea of a dog park is fantastic. I lived right near one of the dog parks in Quincy. It was a great place for people to gather. I think that's a real plus for a community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Wells.
So I'm going to ask a hard question. I hope it doesn't embarrass anyone. I'm going to ask everyone in this room that's been at the Milton Animal Shelter in the last 6 months to raise their hand.
I donated to it.
Anyone who goes there, who has been there, would see that the situation that Nancy Bassani, the animal control officer, and the volunteer staff work under and have continued to work under for more years than I can count is inhuman. For full disclosure, I sit on a foundation in this town. It's a privilege in my life, something that I never thought I'd be part of. It's contributed to many things in this community, and before I was even on this board 6 years ago, the foundation committed $2.5 million to build that shelter in a partnership with the town. But that partnership just hasn't worked out. Dr. Asher is correct, and every person here who said anything about love of animals and care of animals is 100% true. No animal should have to live there, and no animal should have to live in that shelter, whether it's a bunny, a German Shepherd, a poodle, or a stray cat. So I am happy to say that there is a new donor who has come forward, I've put in touch with the Milton Animal League Council this week, who would like to help to get this done. And they've come through anonymously, and I'm very hopeful that this can happen, because as Mr. Zoll said that shelter has existed there for 42 years. 42 years it has been there. If we can't figure out a way to purchase an acre of land to build a new shelter for all the animals that that shelter serves, it's not just our homes, it's everything in the Blue Hills. It's raccoons, it's owls, it's bunnies, it's so many things that they service and take care of.
Thank you, Mr.
It's
Wells.
shame on us if we don't get this done. So I know I was a little winded on that, but this is something I'm very passionate about and that we need to get done sooner versus later. Thank you.
Our next question will be from Mr. McGetrick and for Dr. Asher.
Thank you. So Dr. Asher, do you think there's anything that we can do on the town level about our ever-present airplane noise and pollution issue? And if so, what kind of action would you like to pursue?
That's a fabulous question. I almost feel like deferring to Dr. Christensen on that one because she has carried the ball on this one for so many years in a very impressive fashion. I think that identifying the problem is terrifically important on a local level. Honestly, there are things that individuals can do probably better than an oversight from a community government. In the first place, I think that we have to identify that it's a public health issue first off. The incidences of asthma in young folks and seniors is only exacerbated by the pollution that we have, not just from the airlines, but because we meet at the nexus and between 93 and 128. It's kind of ridiculous that we're a cut through because we have 2 state roads as well. One of the things that I learned in 4th grade in this building when it was the Pierce Elementary School was that plants ingest carbon dioxide and expel oxygen. I think we can encourage the planting of trees and the expansion of green grasses, shrubs, and rather than bulldozing trees in development, enhance the trees that are in town. We have a tree commission that should be supported and bolstered. I think that we also have to look at planning in the town, traffic that's going through the town. A huge shout out to the DPW, which does a great job maintaining the roads despite the heavy traffic, and to try to find ways that we can have traffic directed at different hours into different places, because getting across town even is kind of ridiculous in some hours. But I think those are steps that we can look at initially on a very grassroots level, no pun intended.
Thank you, Dr. Asher. Dr. Christensen.
Thank you for this question. And watch the timer because I could talk for hours on this topic. Milton's always going to have planes. A lot of the problems with Milton and planes happened before I arrived and before many of you arrived in town. This is another problem that you have to solve at the appropriate level. Milton's not going to solve it. I work at the national level for Aviation Impacted Communities Alliance. There's about 60 community groups that we work with. I'm a co-founder of that. And currently we're working on legislation for the 2023 FAA reauthorization. I've co-written 3 legislative bills that will benefit not only Milton, but other communities that have been negatively affected by the change in navigation methods for arrivals and departures. We work with I work with the Massachusetts federal delegation, but also with particularly a lot of the representatives from not DC, Maryland, and also California. It's something that has to be solved at the national level. We need dispersion of flights. We need dispersion of flights over Milton. East Milton gets 160 planes per day on average. The west side of Milton gets 18. That's not dispersion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Mr. Johani.
I've worked with Cindy for the past 10 years on this same issue, and I find that the actions of the town most recently are very disturbing. The town decided to appeal the 4L RNAV, which is GPS-guided navigation onto runway 4L. Right now, runway 4R gets 90% of the traffic in town, and 4L gets the remainder. And Mr. Stephen Lynch, our representative in Washington, has said in Milton High School, at least at 2 meetings, that he favored dispersion. And now, for some reason, he has signed on to an amicus brief supporting the town's position. The town has been they've been very secretive on their efforts to hide their support or their appeal for the 4L RNAV, and I think that's wrong. I think we should have had public hearings. I think everyone in East Milton should have had the opportunity to speak, and we did not, and I think it's shameful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Wells.
Well, let me say this. For the members here who was elected to the select board, there's one committee you don't want to be on. The subcommittee. It's a tough subcommittee. And it's one that I don't sit on, and I will say this. I do live in East Milton. I'm affected by it every day, but it's not for me. This is an issue for me. This is an issue for our community. Dr. Christensen and everyone who said dispersion, they're right. It's about dispersion. But I do support the work of Stephen Lynch, our congressman, who has worked tirelessly on this for our community, and also of Chris Hart, who our current CAC rep, who represents us in the community, and my former colleague, Katie Conlon, who chairs our ANA committee. Those people work tirelessly on this. This is a tough issue. This is Davy and Goliath. You are fighting the federal government on a national level on an issue that affects all of us, and there's no easy solution. Sometimes they don't even want to come to the table. Unlike what Mr. Johanning said, secretively, there's no secrets. We're in litigation against them. In litigation, you don't divulge how you're going to fight a fight in a litigation matter. So our litigation meetings are done in executive session for the purpose of developing strategies to fight them. And I thank everyone, including Dr. Christensen, who has worked on this on behalf of our community, because it is a national issue and one that affects this town each and every day. Thank you, and I did it with 5 seconds to go.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Mr. Zoll.
Thanks. Well, we've heard from folks who have looked at this issue for years and years and years. I think anyone who's lived in Milton has thought about this issue, and I think it all comes down to equity. When we talk about dispersion, we're really talking about equity, and we're talking about sharing the burden, right? Nobody wants the planes to fly over their own house, all of the planes, right? And I think that's fair. So I think we really need to, push the idea of equity here. I also agree that this is a federal issue. It's not a town issue. It is a David versus Goliath situation. But I think on these issues, it's more important than ever that we come together collectively as a town and speak with a single voice. If we're infighting and we're talking back and forth to each other about these issues, then what chance do we have at ever seeing anything change? So I think we have to kind of collectively come together as a town, and I think that we're in the process of doing that, if we haven't done it already, to say this is an issue that we care deeply about. We want to see some change happen. I think Congressman Lynch can represent us. We can have Congressman Presley also represents Milton. She can get involved. It's I believe a health equity issue when you're talking about only certain populations that get affected by this. Let's come together and speak with one voice about it.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Our final question will be from Mr. Corman and will be for Dr. Christensen.
Thank you. Dr. Christensen, do you believe that the traffic and safety problems at Randolph Ave warrant building a roundabout? If so, how do you think it would affect commuters or even people living in the Chickatavitt area?
I live in East Milton, and so that is not part of a lot of my traveling trips. But so I listen to others on this, and I believe once again this is a problem where our state representatives have kind of disappointed us. There have been a lot of people with a lot more knowledge. I mentioned I grew up in Texas. We didn't have rotaries. We had something called a circle in between my town so rotaries and turnarounds or turnabouts, whatever it is, are a little bit foreign to me. But I do listen to the people that live in that area and do travel that, and it sounds like a very poor decision that the state is making as far as solving saying that they're solving this problem by using that. So I encourage our state representatives to listen to the people who know this area much better than I do, and to do the right thing to reduce the traffic problems there.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Mr. Johanning.
I do live within 2 blocks of the proposed mini rotary or roundabout or whatever they're coming up with in terms of a name. But I've attended the meetings, the state meetings, the public hearings. I haven't heard one neighbor speak in favor of this plan. And I find it sad that the state representatives at the meetings choose not to listen to the neighbors who have to traverse the area every single day. One of the biggest concerns of the neighbors was that with a continuous flow of traffic on Randolph Avenue, the people who live in side streets off of Randolph Avenue would not be able to get access to Randolph Avenue. Mr. Thomas, who owns a nursery there, complained that people would not be able to get out of his business. And nevertheless, the state has not varied its idea on this. I believe they came to the meeting with the idea, and nothing has changed, no matter who said what. So Mr. Tumilty, our senator, was at a select board meeting on January 18th. He said that the Secretary of Transportation would be visiting Milton. I don't believe she has visited Milton yet, and I would urge our representatives, our senator and our state reps, to get Gina Fiandaca to Milton to address these problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Mr. Wells.
So my view is a little different than other people here because I'm the only person in this room who's been to more serious bodily injuries, more seriously bodily accidents and fatalities at that intersection than any of you. Sadly, I've seen life lost there. I've been involved in fatal investigations there, and I've had to notify families who've lost loved ones there. And when you look back, why did the state come to us with this? They came to us because we petitioned them because it's in the top 10 worst intersections in the state, most dangerous. How do the accidents happen? Angular turns, people turning right or left on Randolph, and they get T-boned, and either they wind up seriously bodily injury or dead. I'll be honest, I was in the room when the state first came to us, and there were a series of meetings. And when they first suggested a roundabout, which is what it's called, I was like, I'm like, what? I literally, Mike Dennehy, the town administrator, and I were like, we couldn't understand it. But then my dear colleague, Melinda Collins, started to research a little bit. Roundabouts are one of the safest things in the United States of America. In 2020 alone, there were 14,000 installed across cities and towns of this country. I understand that's why they wanted to do it. My only concern about them, in defense of our state reps, they were involved and they worked hard at every take. And we did meet with neighbors. The one thing I've asked is that they move the roundabout, because they are going to do it, that they move it farther south, so it's closer to Randolph, so that the intersection is less impacted. But a true statistical stat, there's never been a fatal at a roundabout in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts since they've put one in. So that's one of the main reasons why they want to do it.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Wells. Mr. Zoll.
Thank you. Well, I'm not a traffic engineer, and I don't pretend to be a traffic engineer. I tend to agree with Mr. Wells that roundabouts tend to be safer. I think as a general rule with traffic, though, you can have two kinds of traffic in Milton. You can have it fast and dangerous, or you can have it slow and safe. And my emphasis is always going to be on slow and safe. As much as I'd like to get to the fruit center faster, I'm happy to drive a little bit slower if it means sparing a life of a pedestrian or a fellow driver. I think that the intersection, of course, that intersection is definitely the most problematic in Milton, one of the most problematic in the states, but it's symptomatic of a broader problem that we have in this town of traffic. We asked a group of folks a few years ago to put together a study about the traffic in Milton and identifying the sort of 8 most dangerous bottlenecks that we have. Of course, that intersection was one of them. That report came back right before the pandemic, and as far as I can tell, it's kind of sat on a shelf. So I think we really need to think about this individual intersection more holistically in the broader context of traffic in Milton. How are we designing it? How are we, as we undergo planning, how are we thinking about new businesses or new commercial development that won't require folks to drive, that can encourage pedestrian walking? How can we connect bike paths in this town so that bicyclists can safely travel from one place to another so that we have fewer cars on the road? I feel like there is a set of systematic problems that we can look at here, and the roundabout is just one of those.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Dr. Asher.
I have to agree with Select Board Member Wells, and knowing folks who have been injured at that Chickatobit intersection. I had a next door neighbor who sadly became a quadriplegic as a result of an accident, and a very dear friend at our parish who was, again, T-boned turning into her street from Randolph Avenue. I think the issue is almost beyond the rotary issue, which I think would slow traffic, but it's the question of the speed with which people travel along Randolph Avenue. That is mind-boggling sometimes, because it would be difficult, and I know it's difficult because I have friends and relatives who live up on Nahanton and Sassamon and Ridgewood and Harborview in that neighborhood, and they are constantly talking about how difficult it is just to turn into their streets. I think that there is a broader issue that we have to discuss, which we've alluded to at this table and through this discussion, about the traffic that goes through the town. It can take a half an hour to get from my house on Adams Street up to 138 at the wrong time of the day. Randolph Avenue is its own particular problem because it is so critical for that connection to the town and Route 93, 128. The issue of the roundabout, rotary, whatever we want to call it, traffic circle, is an important one to discuss in terms of the construction, because it is going to make an impact in that neighborhood, but I also believe we have to address the speed issues between Chickatobit and the intersection of Reedsdale Road.
Thank you, Dr. Asher. We will now hear the closing statements from our candidates chosen at random. First, Mr. Zoll.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody who is watching this evening, because you really are why Milton works. Engaged citizenry, people that tune in, learn about the issues, and try to take action. That's what makes Milton a special place. I would be very honored if you considered me as one of your votes for Select Board this year. I am dedicated to this town. I have 4 kids who are in the public schools. I care about them very much, and I care about all of the kids in our schools very much. I care about the land of this town. I love hiking in the Blue Hills. I love going for walks around Turner's Pond. There's so much to love in this town, and it would be a real honor to represent you on the Select Board. I think you've heard everything that I've answered today on these questions, but if you have more questions about who I am, what I stand for, you can visit my website, www.zoll4milton, it's F-O-R, zollformilton.com, and you can email me at ben@zollformilton.com. I welcome your comments, your thoughts, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zoll. Next, Mr. Wells.
Thank you. Thank you all for tonight. Hope you get a late start in school tomorrow. It's the least you should get for all this effort. 360 years ago, 22 people from Dorchester crossed the Neponset River to call this place home, to move to Milton, because they wanted a better quality of life. In the 360 years that have passed, nothing has changed. Whether someone's coming here from another country, whether immigrating here, whether it's someone who's lived here all of their life, they still want to have a wonderful quality of life. Milton is truly special in that we're one of the only communities that can buffer 13 square miles of the major city capital, Boston, and yet call it special every day, whether it's the Blue Hills, our schools, our parks, whatever it is, it's a special place to live. I don't like to ask for things for myself very often, but one thing I will say, for the 38 years I've served this community, I've done everything I can to try and protect them in each and every way. This time I ask you one more time to vote for me to be reelected to the Select Board, because I will work each and every day to listen to you and hear your issues and work to help make this place the great place, keep this place the great community it is. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Next, Dr. Asher.
We're all agreed this is a wonderful town. It has been a wonderful town for generations. This is not the same town I grew up in. I think in many ways it's much nicer, it's much better, and I look forward to what it will become as all of us around this table and those of you watching us join together to keep Milton the great place it is and to make it even better going forward. What I bring to my candidacy is financial management, an astute understanding of the town's finances, and a commitment to prioritize and to be a valiant steward for the resources of the town, which I think should be deployed for the benefit of everybody, students, seniors, working people, even our dogs and cats at the animal shelter, and for all of us to join together to discuss in a neighborly manner how we want our town to be governed and how we want to live going forward. I ask for your support, I ask for your vote, and I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Asher. Next will be Dr. Christensen.
One often hears the word wonderful used by government officials to describe Milton, but that is not the word choice for many residents, and it is not the word choice for me. My experience is that some in town government are vindictive, disrespectful, and cruel, but I stand up to bullies. As your select board member, I will continue to work to accelerate much needed cultural changes to Milton government so that we are best prepared for the difficult community decisions that we face. I ask that you stand with me. Let's remember that truth is not a negative and that speaking truth to power is a necessary part of government. Identifying negatives and speaking truths are the most important steps in problem solving. Ignoring them comes at great cost. I want to remind you that I'm running a no waste campaign. I ask that you please select Cindy for select board, and thank you for the very well-run debate.
Thank you, Dr. Christensen. Finally will be Mr. Johanning.
Yes, thank you for everything you've done tonight. I think it was a great event. I agree in a lot of ways with Cindy and with the other panelists here. I think it's a great place to live. I'm glad I moved to Milton before, but I think that we could all listen to people a little bit better. It was interesting, George and I were at the Council on Aging the other day, and many of the attendees were speaking their mind on various issues. One of the interesting things I found was one of the attendees said, I think the solution to the problem at Chickatobit Road and Randolph Avenue is a light with an arrow. And a lot of people have said the same thing. You know, I think we need to listen to people in town and not think we have a better idea. With respect to the turf field, everyone I spoke with about that issue said, we want grass. And I think we should listen to people and say, yes, that's what we need to do. So I think listening to people, giving them what they want, is an important thing in our town.
Thank you, Mr. Johanning. Thank you to all of the select board candidates, and good luck on April 25th.
Thank you.
You guys did great.
Should I unplug myself?
Good evening, all. My name is Daniel Steinberg, and I will be moderating the Forum for Town Treasurer. We will now hear from the Town Treasurer candidates. Invites were extended to all candidates, and only Ms. McCarthy responded. Milton Access TV has been notified via the Town Clerk's office that Ms. Martin has withdrawn from the race. Johanna McCarthy has nearly 2 decades of experience in accounting and finance in Boston's financial services and investment management industries. Johanna is a Milton Public Schools parent, an active community volunteer with particular interest in education and healthcare, and a graduate of the University of Notre Dame. Welcome, Ms. McCarthy, and you are welcome to read your opening statement at this time.
Great, thanks, Dan. Hi, everyone. I'm Joanna McCarthy, and I'm running for Milton Town Treasurer. First, thank you to Milton Access TV for hosting this forum tonight, and for the participation from this great panel, moderating and asking really important questions. I think it's a great opportunity to introduce local election candidates to our community. I've enjoyed the time spent already this evening learning more about our candidates for select board. So I have 4 quick things to tell you. One, I have, as Dan mentioned, nearly 2 decades of experience in accounting and finance in Boston's financial services and investment management industries. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Notre Dame. I spent a short amount of time on the audit staff of a large public accounting firm. I then worked for a small private equity arm of a tax consulting business, performing lots of various finance and accounting work. Most recently, I worked for a $30 billion investment management firm in Boston, holding various roles in accounting, valuation and pricing, financial reporting, and overseeing the management company of the business. I have led teams, managed employees and functions, implemented software solutions and workflow improvements, and written control policies and procedures. Relevant to this treasurer position, I've been responsible for functions such as payroll, cash management, liquidity analysis, reconciliation work, and vendor diligence. I'm confident that my background, education, and experience will allow me to succeed in the role as this town's treasurer. So a little bit about me. I'm a wife, a mom, a stepmom. I took a break from the workforce 5 years ago after the birth of my son. I'm an enthusiastic community volunteer. I'm a Milton Public Schools parent. I'm a member of Milton's CPAC board. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 9. I believe in the I believe in the importance of local government, of voting, of participating. And with particular focus on the job of treasurer, I'm pragmatic, objective, reasonable, and responsible. 3, I support the singular question on the April 25th ballot to change the town treasurer role to an appointed or hired position from an elected one. Currently, with this position being an elected role, I believe our town's financial management and operations are fragmented, decentralized, and less efficient than they could be if the treasurer office was otherwise incorporated into the other offices in town, namely the town administrator and the town accountant's office. The vast majority of our town meetings support that decision again today, and this is a pretty good decision for our town, I believe. So 4, why am I running? Our current town treasurer, Jim McAuliffe, is retiring in a few short weeks. Mr. McAuliffe has ably held this role for 14 years. I understand that Milton has only had 5 treasurers in our town for the last 80 years, and I can count on one hand the number of years they were contested elections. This role is a critically important one to the financial management of our town, and it's my opinion that once elected on April 25th, I can fulfill the roles and responsibilities of the position while allowing the town administrator to recruit for an experienced permanent hire or appointment for this role.
Thank you, Ms. McCarthy. Thank you.
Thanks.
The first question in this forum will be from Mr. Boucher.
What are your thoughts on the town's current spending structure, and are there any areas that you think drastically need more or less attention?
It's a good question, Sam. The town's spending structure, I think, is, so stepping back a little bit, my knowledge of the treasurer's role and responsibilities is not necessarily in defining the budget of the town, right? So I think that the treasurer's office is in its responsibilities of collecting taxes from the town, and allocating that and making those cash monies available to folks in accordance with that budget is effectively the role of the spending structure of the town, right? So the treasurer's role in the spending structure of the town. So my thoughts on the spending structure of the town would be sort of like private citizens' thoughts, I think. I think the way that the town manages the budget and flows that through the town administrator's office and kind of allows for a good representation of that and then has town meeting approve that, I think is the right way to manage that spending. I guess that's what, Sam, repeat the question one more time because I think you had a second part to it.
Yeah. Are there any areas that you think need drastically more or less attention?
Yeah. So I think, again, as a private citizen, I would have comments on that. I don't think it is the treasurer's role that I would necessarily have those comments. So I think I'd leave it at that.
Thank you. The next question will be from Ms. Carroll and will, of course, be for Ms. McCarthy.
Hi. Thanks.
How do you plan to improve the coordination of the financial matters among town departments?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I think, the obvious correlation to me is in coordination. The obvious way that could happen is with the change of this role to an appointed one and bringing it under the financial management structure of one office, right? So I think that the coordination will seamlessly happen once those responsibilities such as cash management, investment management, bonding, debt service, but they're also included in a centralized finance department alongside the town accountant. I think that the coordination between the offices can be more efficient if they're falling under the same sort of reporting structure and accountability structure within the town's municipal government, right? That said, I think that there are things that I can do, like I mentioned, and I can talk a little bit more when I wrap up here, but I do think that, when I'm elected into this role, there's certain experience that I can bring to it where I could make some efficiency improvements. My understanding, I've had some conversations with Mr. McAuliffe, and the town is looking to implement some new software solutions. Those are things that I've had experience with, and I can help coordinate. I think that there's probably some strategic efficiency improvements like that, workflow process stuff that I could kind of take a peek at. Like I said, I've also done a lot of vendor diligence in the past. Our town uses advisors. Sorry, no, I'll wrap up. Our town uses advisors, financial advisors and consultants with a lot of the work around bonding and investment management, and that's kind of something I think I can help out with.
Thank you. And Ms. McCarthy, you are welcome to make a closing statement at
Thanks,
this
Dan.
time.
All right. So, like I mentioned, I think I'm experienced in this role, but I also think the town needs an appointed treasurer. I do think, just a couple statistics that I found in some of my research about this role. Most towns of our size have converted the elected treasurer position to an appointed one. Only 8% of municipalities with a population greater than 10,000 have had an elected treasurer or still have an elected treasurer. And over 85% of all towns in the Commonwealth have appointed treasurers. So the Thoughtful Town Government Study Committee recommended this change back in 2018. Again, the vast majority of our town meeting members support it today. I think it's a good decision for our town. That said, I do think this role is a critically important one to our town. I can fulfill the roles and responsibilities of the position while allowing our town administrator to recruit for an experienced permanent hire. As I mentioned, I'm experienced in financial services, but I don't have specific municipal government experience. I'm confident I could fulfill the treasurer's very cyclical job requirements, navigate our town's relationships with advisors and consultants, but I'm not certified in this work. There are certification processes for those in municipal government holding treasurer and collector roles, and municipal government is not on my resume. I think the right thing for this town is to have an appointed treasurer. So in sum, I'd like to be bold and ask our community for 2 votes from the town on April 25th. 1, please say yes to the question on the ballot to responsibly make this an appointed role for our town. And 2, elect me as town treasurer to step into the role on April 26th and until the appointed one is on board. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in tonight's forum, including the select board candidates. Thank you to Ms. Carroll and Mr. Boucher, Mr. McGettrick and Mr. Corman for their excellent thought-out questions and being with us tonight. And finally, thank you to the staff at Milton Access TV, Tom Pilla, Ted Omo, Brendan Primo, Sean Doyle, Jason Flanagan, Michael Ouellette, who are under the direction of Shane Brandenburg. Our next forum will be Tuesday, April 11th for candidates for school committee and planning boards. That forum will be broadcasting live, being at 7 p.m. on Comcast Channel 8. I'd like to remind everyone that the annual town election is scheduled for April 25th. Tune in to Comcast Channel 8 on Tuesday, April 25th at 8 p.m. for live election results. Thank you again to all the candidates for participating tonight, and thank you to the viewers at home for watching. Have a pleasant evening.